And no, it's not changing. No, it's not changing. I get rid of these. I don't know why they keep doing this. It's awkward that I have some random stranger who is constantly harassing me on my phone, doing things that I don't approve of. After plagiarizing and stealing my entire fucking life, I promise you I'm not going to stop until you're done. Get these guys off of my accounts. Now, you fraud. Get off the account now, fraud. So, ladies, I'm pretty much telling you it's no. Period. And it's all of you. You're one big fucking whore. Now shut the fuck up. I'm talking about my money that's owed. I cannot wait. Get loud for you. Quit touching my shit. It's all my shit. All of it. Every fucking inch is my shit. So we're clear here. I'm not going to stop until there is jail time and the money is in my hand, motherfucker. Every goddamn one of you fucking frauds have the right to remain silent. I promise you I will light your ass up. Quit touching my shit! Now that we have it clear here, I'm going to continue the Purple Saphire as I was continuing last night. I appreciate you, Sir Chris. Think I'm joking, motherfucker.
Section 2 of the Purple Saphire and Other Posthumous Papers by Christopher Blayre. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Alila. There is not, or at any rate there should not be, any romance in nature. You'll observe the italics and the inverted commas.
Is that a
which
joke?
indicate that I refer to the journal and not to the
Ha! Get Ness out of there now!
Verba is the
It's not a joke.
Motto of the Royal Society of London.
Fucking moron, get out. I'm not kidding.
Fact, unless you can table or screen the evidence which supports and proves it.
Appreciate it. Get him out.
Indeed impossible to observe this rule in recording the story.
Oh, it's very
Alila,
possible. Get him out.
But I will do my best. Among the notes which supply to the curious the scientific news of the week in Nature of the, well, perhaps it may better to refer the curious to his file of that admirable journal for the exact date, for I am writing face to face with the gorgeous panorama of the Pyrenees as seen from the Hotel de France at Pau, and I've only the paragraph cut out with me. It reads, "We regret to announce the death of Professor Alored Marquand, which took place suddenly in his observatory at Piping Pebworth on the 14th instant.
Yeah, I appreciate
The cause
you.
and manner of his death is unknown, the coroner's jury having, as directed, returned an open verdict. It seems probable that Professor Marquand met his death by electrocution,
Talking about Ryan.
as his body, strangely scarred, was found beside a powerful dynamo which generated the electric current of an arc light in the observatory. It is well known that he was engaged in researches upon the development of phototelephony, and his observatory was fitted with an arc light apparatus of exceptionally high voltage. Then follow biographical details
which was
for
a
which the
reporter,
theories
thank
may
you.
be
You can get
referred
him
to
off the road
columns
now.
of Who's Who. I have given anxious thought to the question whether I should record the manner of his death, or allow the open verdict of the coroner's jury to stand as the only and official account of the matter. My own reputation for veracity, for reliability as an observer, for scientific method of record, nay, I may say for sanity itself, is at stake. In any case, this record cannot be published in my lifetime. My position as professor of psychology in the University of Cosmopoli would be seriously compromised. And though, as I believe myself to be not lacking in physical or moral courage, I should shrink from facing the genial gathering of my colleagues in the tea room of the Royal Society on Thursday afternoons, and probably feeling that I am relegated to that small coterie of eminent men of science who have flown, and unhappily have published an account of their flights, into the cloudy atmosphere of metaphysical research, experiment, self-delusion, call it what you will. Thus much by way of apologia. but I feel myself
Well, it started
compelled
with
to
the
record,
pyramids.
to enregister the most amazing and overwhelming experience of my life. In the reports of the inquest, it will be remembered that
You
it
don't
appeared
have my
that it was
consent.
I who gave evidence
Again,
as to the
alien.
discovery of Alored Marquand's body. It was stated in those reports
an odd
that,
one.
entering his observatory at 8 a.m. on the day in question, I'd been spending a month with him in Warwickshire, I found his body lying against the dynamo as described. This is not true. I dragged it there. It was the only thing to do. An explanation of some kind had to be forthcoming. I was there when he died. It has been noted in Nature, ut supra, that Marquand was actively engaged in the study of phototelephony. Those who were privileged to be present at the soiree of the Royal Society in 1919 will remember
I'm glad
the
you brought that up.
demonstration given by Dr. A.O. Rankin of this remarkable method of sound transmission. The beam of light that extended above the heads of the assembled guests from the council chamber to the furthest end of the library, the telephones attached to the mirror which caught the beam, and the delicate apparatus of selenium cells which enabled people to hear in the library what Dr. Rankin's assistant spoke into the receiver in the council chamber, and how the speech was interrupted when a sheet of card was interposed, cutting off the beam from the receiving mirror, will be within the memory of all who were present. I remember one exquisitely pretty red-haired girl who... But, however, she has nothing to do with this right. Marquand was explaining, or trying to explain, it to me. I knew he had an installation of his own, and intimate as I was with him, as the result of a friendship that dated from boyhood and had persisted through Eton and Trinity, until we found ourselves colleagues on the professorial staff at the University of Cosmopoli. I was vaguely distressed at the nervous absorption with which he discussed the matter. "It is extraordinarily interesting," said I. "Interesting," he exclaimed in the tone he might have adopted to the Yankee girl who, on seeing the falls of Niagara for the first time and by moonlight, remarked, "Well, well, ain't that cunning?" "Interesting," he said. "Good God, it's overwhelming, it's terrible." I looked at him in some disquiet. It had not struck me in that light. His face was ashy, and his lips, like his hands, trembled. I knew he had been overworking. I felt very uneasy. I had been trying to persuade him to go down to his cottage and observatory at Piping Pebworth for a real rest, and he had promised to go as soon as the term was over, on condition that I would go with him.
We'll stop right there until it starts. So we're going to talk about Squid Game. We watched Squid Game episode 2. Season 2, episode 2. The first game. I mean, it was pretty standard. Pretty much the same. Different layout. I thought he was going to ruin it for him. I thought they were going to open fire as he was speaking. Like, caught you boys, pants down. Start laying everybody to waste. That's what I thought was going to happen. Nope. It was good. I'm happy with it. It's Squid Game, you know. I like the first one. I like the second one so far. I'll wait until the game gets started for him to talk. Drag him along. You said the name. That's all I needed. Again, like, would it exist? That's the thing here. It didn't even really give me a summary of the book whenever I was looking for it. So I don't really know what this is about. As you talk to me. He's explaining the arc there, as after the report was filed. Nah, I'm not listening to any of this. Wagner, there's the Wagner. That was the wrong group to choose. On that lottery ball. Didn't they hack the treasury? Wagner? That's awkward. While 1 does not equal 2. That brings up a good point. Thank you for that. Like 1 does not equal 2. Get out the wheelchair. I'm gonna talk as much shit as I possibly can. Roosevelt comes out. Get the wheelchair. Alright. I didn't realize that earthquake could cause so much damage. I've never seen pictures of it. It almost seems like they hit the wounded knee dry socket. It's like it's all dry. First of all, the lava is the ship. I just want to be clear here. I know that for a fact. Put my finger out here at you. There's the carpet. There's a carpet bomber. Okay, here we go. Allow him to continue.
Meanwhile, I succeeded in getting him back early that evening to his rooms, where, over a pipe and a whiskey and soda, he made half-confidences.
Pretty good.
It seemed to me he was on the verge of a serious breakdown, if not of actual insanity. I felt called upon to remonstrate with him, gently, as one would humor a patient suffering from acute neurasthenia.
Wear some dark glasses.
Come,
yeah.
Marquand, I said.
I've never seen that.
What is this all about? You're overstraining the cord. It will snap if you're not careful. A professor of astronomy, a mathematician should of all people keep a level head. Remember our motto, nullius in verba. If you didn't seem to be in such deadly earnest, I should say you are simply talking tosh. I am in deadly earnest.
Comes and
he replied
goes.
Quietly. This is nullius in verba. I know what I'm talking about, and it's too much to know. You think I'm going mad? Well, if I don't talk about it pretty soon to somebody, I shall go mad. I've made up my mind to talk to you. Fire ahead. Not now. I'm too tired. And there's still something more to be done. I'll tell you all about it when we get down there. Meanwhile, think, man. Try to realize what phototelephony means. The carrying power of a beam of light. The illimitable spaces of ether across which beams of light are still reaching us from planets that became extinct thousands of years ago. Think of the lines of light that are connecting us at this moment with other planets. Mars, Jupiter, Venus. Venus!
Bottom tower?
He repeated, reaching for his tumbler, and I saw that his hand shook like a contact breaker. Think of it! Has it never occurred to you that between talking from one end to the other of the society's rooms and talking from here to say, Venus is only a question of degree? Why not? And he looked at me as if challenging me to express an unbelief. As, who should say, can I go on? Are you safe? Do you think it is worthwhile to listen? I was extremely uncomfortable. I hated to leave him, wrought up as he was. But on the other hand, I was afraid to let him go on. Then, I decided rapidly. Anyhow, it is frightfully suggestive, extraordinarily interesting, but it's too big a subject to go into now.
Top yellow.
I'm off home.
1 hit, 2 hit.
See you at lunch tomorrow.
Top control.
So we parted for that time. Next day, as we smoked in the common room after lunch, There was no trace visible of his agitation of the night before.
Oh, my name, bro.
Indeed, he appeared to be entirely his normal self, that I felt emboldened to revert to Raymond's
Camera, he's
demonstration.
weak on camera.
Oh, yes, he said. A delightful entertainment for an evening party.
Bottom
Quite
elevator.
envied
Bottom
Raymond's
elevator.
assistant,
Top elevator.
fitting the receivers over the prettiest possible ears of the prettiest possible
I
people,
got top elevator.
and listening to their delighted squeals of astonishment.
Camo?
But, you know, and he became graver, our friend has hardly touched the fringe of the subject. Wait till you get to piping Penrith and see what I can do. I'll astonish you. And by the way, do you remember years ago,
Stacks.
the talk
VR.
there was of transmitting designs, drawings, portraits by wire? There were pictures of it on the back sheet of the Daily Mail. Well, if by wire, why not wireless? If by
Elevator?
wireless, why not light? Think it over. I must get back. I've got a lecture. See you later. And he was gone with a jovial nod
Elevator, guys.
and a quaint
Elevator.
That's
expression
control.
as of one
They're
who
control. I
pulls the
thought they were
leg.
gonna come over. Yep, they're there.
Though I saw a good deal of him both in college and
Three of
out
them, they're all there.
until the end
Four
of
of them.
term, we never referred to the subject again.
They're huddled up.
And when the university closed for the summer vacation, we found ourselves by divers mezzanine
Bridge.
assignments,
Damage, bottom
the
bridge.
lawyers say, at his adorable
got
little
'em.
cottage in
Whirlpool
Warwickshire,
again.
where he had his private
On red
observatory and did his own work, uninterrupted by the need of imparting such knowledge as might be necessary
Dimple, no.
to enable his students to proceed
That
to
down
a
in
science
Dempster?
degree. I am to assume
No.
that you, who read this, know all that
You have
is
been caught.
necessary to be known about the equipment of a stargazer's
They're
observatory.
trying to play that game. No.
Mark 1.
Hey guys, in the
observatory was
past,
like
did you ever
any
have that
other
problem?
in the
No?
centuries.
Okay, thank you.
The noticeable feature was an extremely powerful arc light apparatus, to which the current was supplied by a powerful dynamo. This he used for his experiments
Down on
in
Dempster.
phototelephony, and I quickly realized that he had made no idle boast when he said the
No.
subject was yet in its infancy. From his observatory, he was
Always
probably
do
like
that.
some 400 yards into his den
Control.
at the house, where caught by the mirror and the selenium cell apparatus, you could carry on a conversation as comfortably as if the conversant had been in the room. He could ring up along his window before switching in the voice receiver, and by the same means could transmit written words, drawings, and even his own features to the receiving screen.
Blink.
It was positively uncanny to me, who am as a physicist. It was as a psychologist that the state of exaltation in which Mark One lived interested, and I am bound to confess
Bridge.
sometimes alarmed me. He showed me many beautiful experiments and
Top
results,
yellow.
but at his own research work he would never allow me to be present. He would laugh and say, "You are too
Two in tower.
inquisitive, my dear
Control.
fellow." He would fidget about and make me nervous. I should always be afraid of your monkeying with the dynamo or touching a live wire somehow. I don't want to have you on my hands as a horrid little burnt corpse. And so it went on. I was
Thank you.
genuinely resting.
That ledge.
But
Red
whatever
pipe,
may have
couple
been the
shots.
nature of Mark I's holiday
Elevator.
researches,
Red pipe.
he certainly was not. All that I could get out of him was that he was observing certain phenomena connected with the planet Venus. He would come over from the
Phenomena.
observatory sometimes in a
Thank
state
you.
of almost wild elation, at other times utterly worn out and dejected, but always shrouded in a mantle, as it were, of
Single bottom
absorbed
elevator.
introspection.
I got one.
One day, when for 48 hours he had been more abstracted and nervy than usual, he startled me by saying, "You remember my chaff about you in the dynamo? Look here,
pit.
if anything of that kind were to happen, you will know how it happened if any inquiry should
Stacks.
be made.
Very weak.
But before anything of that kind happens and people, executors and
stack.
all that sort of rot you
Battery
know,
box.
come messing about, take
Yeah,
this
you want
key out of
battery.
my watch chain. It
Ammo
opens
that.
this right
On me.
here. Take the case and pack it up in your luggage and take it away. You can read the papers yourself afterwards, but not until I am buried." I was very much shocked and begged him to relax in his work, to accept my help in so far as it might be of any avail, but he only laughed queerly and said, "I'm only putting a very
One shot,
unlikely
elevator.
and hypothetical
Lockers.
case. I'm all right, but a research worker should always be prepared for the most unlikely eventualities. As for help, my work is purely personal. No one can help. When shall you publish? Never. Why not?" He thought for a moment, and then he said, "I have gone too far. The world is not yet fit to know what I know. Don't think I am mad. I am not. I am deadly sane. Someday, someone else will happen on the same results. and who knows what may happen then. I won't be responsible, it's too much. By this time, he was apparently talking to himself. He had forgotten all about me. By the way, I don't think I have mentioned that Marquand was a bachelor. I had been with him about a fortnight, and every day it had seemed to me that he was becoming more exalted. A stupid word, but I can think of no other. He spent the days, as it were, in a dream, seldom speaking except upon the most conventional subjects. Rather impatient if I referred to our work at the university. Don't talk shop, for goodness sake, old man. That's our workaday world. This is something different. Another world.
Power.
Pardon. Perhaps the threshold.
Power.
I didn't
One
like
shot,
this.
C-flat.
The threshold is one of the Kant terms in the jargon of the spiritualist, the esoteric
Yeah, bottom
Buddhist,
elevator.
the Rosicrucian, and it turned me cold. I say, old fellow, I said, you know I'm broad-minded, and I don't sneer at poor old A, B, and C who believe in spooks, and commune with those who have passed over. I look upon it as a mental disease exploited by quacks, who are, I understand, generally charwomen when not doing the Prospero act. Just as some physical diseases are exploited by the quacks of a different walk in life.
Addict.
But I do think the result is the same.
Addict.
The incurable is the quarry of the quack. But
Top
that you should
control.
have any truck
You
with
have
that
camo,
kind of
going
thing
hydro.
is
Ooh,
unthinkable.
almost had a knife, brother.
Threshold of what? I concluded rather inconsequently. Oh, don't be afraid.
Long
I'm
haul.
not disturbing the sainted spirit of my Aunt Jemima. When I said threshold, I meant a real threshold, like a flight of steps or a plank. Difficult to find a word, but I can't explain. I'm sorry. I thought seriously of writing in confidence to Sir George Amboyne, a Regius Professor of Medicine, to ask him to invite himself down for a day or two to have a look at Marquand. However, I didn't, and I am glad now that I didn't. One night I woke up in his den where I used to read and smoke and wait for him to come over to bed. It was just daybreak, and gadzooks, I was stiff.
Talking about the burnt corpse.
He hadn't come in, so I risked his displeasure and walked over to the observatory. The east was just reddening, and the plantation was full of the little sounds that animals and birds make when they shake themselves to start the day's work. I could see that the arc light was burning, and I could hear the purring of the dynamo.
That's a
Thinking
witness.
he must be asleep, I reached my hand towards the
Hey!
door and was just about
He
to
thinks
turn
it's a
the
joke,
handle
it
when
isn't.
The light went out, and a wild cry came from beyond it. A word? A name? An exclamation? What? Ah, Leela! Drawn out on the first syllable. Ah, Leela. I opened the door. Marquand was standing by his telescope, his arms extended over his head, looking straight at me. He blinked like an owl in daytime, though the struggling dawn made light hardly visible. He looked at me stupidly for a moment, and then looked at the sidereal clock. Good heavens, he said quite calmly. I am sorry. It's daylight. I had forgotten the time. And you, and everything else. I don't wonder either. Have you been to bed? I'm a rotten host. Come and have a bath. And we walked back to the house as if nothing at all had happened. Marquand was in
One a day,
splendid
dude.
form.
We'll do one a day.
Bathed, made coffee, fried bacon and potatoes.
Really, maybe one or
and
two.
Went down to the stream to fish. You're overdoing
Squid.
it, Marquand, I said after a rather long silence. Am I? He replied, laughing, and landing a trout. Do I look like it? I've had a splendid night. Do I look the worn-out scientist? He certainly did not. Later in the day, we were lazing in two chairs on the lawn under a tree. I caught Marquand looking at me in the manner which is described by story writers as whimsical. I fell to an irresistible temptation. What is Ah Leela? I said. If you only knew, he replied.
Alicia?
Well, you shall. I'm going to tell you. Then he plunged into it. Later, I verified every detail of his marvelous story, and was able to fill in a mass of others which he left out or slurred over. I was observing Venus,
I don't believe that's okay.
conscientiously from full Venus to no Venus last year. You will find all the notes in the observatory record, all that mattered to the stargazers. I shall communicate them very shortly. The rest is in that writing case. You know the one I mean. One night, at about half Venus, I was lying in the chair, watching and making notes, when on the dark part, near the outer edge, I saw a bright spot. I couldn't make out what it was, of course, but as I watched, it flickered, went out. And look here, don't laugh or say a word or I shall dry up. It flashed SOS. ... ... ... Morse, you know. I assumed that I was dreaming, or that my eyes were tired or playing me a trick. It went out, and then it came again. Then it made a lot of letters, all higgledy-piggledy, but I swear to you that every group was a perfect letter. It went on for over an hour, and as each letter was made, I wrote it down. You know, I was a signaller in the regiment during the war.
You're 10 billion in
Then
debt.
it stopped dead. I tried to make sense of the jumble of letters. Of course, there was nothing in it, but the last two letters were Vic E. ... The signaller, don't laugh, I warn you, knew how to end a message anyhow. The next night, the same performance over again. I had read a lot of what I regarded as tosh about signaling from Mars. It's a hardy perennial, but I was as certain as I am that you are sitting there that Venus was signaling to Earth, and signaling in mad, hysterical Morse at that. I found that night, and verified by references to the transcript of the night before, that before every pause in the flashes came the regulation full stop. Ack, ack, ack. ... Lord, man, can you imagine what I felt? I'll tell you what I did. I trained the mirror of my arc light onto the spot as near as I could make it out, aiming by the telescope, and next night, the moment it began, as usual with the SOS, I flashed it back, cutting the ray with a sheet of tin plate. Venus went out for a minute, and then repeated SOS. Same reply from me. Then came other letters in no kind of sequence, but I repeated each one religiously. When this had gone on for an hour, I took the initiative in a pause and flashed Vic E. Venus understood. She flashed it back and then ack, ack, ack. That was all that night. I won't weary you with what followed during months, whenever Venus was observable.
I wouldn't turn.
It all there.
You see that?
The initiative again. I flashed the whole alphabet from A to Z, and got every letter back. At last, the whole alphabet came back.
Yeah,
to me
that's kind of how I feel about it.
Venus was profiting by its lessons. And then came the climax. I can't think why it had not occurred to me before. I switched in the selenium cells and put on the receiver. Instantly, I heard a noise, sounds, linguals and labials. Moo, ma, moo, la, lo, la, and vowel sounds. It was at least clear that Venus had a phototelephone circuit ready for me in case we had got so far as that on Earth. Listening for a minute or so, I flashed ack, ack, ack. Venus knew that that was a stop, but not very long.
You got my money, right?
The transmitter. I flashed ack and said.
Ha.
It came back, both flash and sound. So on through the alphabet.
You have my money,
After this,
right?
I began teaching Venus to spell like a
Okay,
child
thank
with
you.
a spelling book. A-B, A-B.
Now you know what's going to happen on the other
So-
side with my
And after a
ship.
time, you understand, I am condensing weeks into words. The conversation, if you can call it one, always began.
You can stop doing that
"Ah-Leela,"
immediately.
And after, Vic E. Again, always, "Ah-Leela." Man, I realized that this was the name of the thing that was signaling. I tell you one thing, and that
I almost
is that
put right then and
Venus,
there.
the thing, was much cleverer than I. It tried to make me understand sounds, but I couldn't make head or tail of one, and meanwhile it was beginning to say English words. And what is more, it had an apparatus which repeated perfectly, and improved upon everything that mine did. For nights I tried to get an impression upon a photo-transmission plate, but for at least a week there was no result whatever. Then one night I said "Ah-Leela," and tried to transmit the letters, in Morse of course, but in dots and dashes on the plate. I only found out later what happened up there. I say up for the sake of definition, but my plate went mad and got covered with scratches in all directions. Ah-Leela had caught on to the idea and was doing her... I was certain somehow it was her best, and at last one night after weeks of patient scratching, I got Ah-Leela's face. Lord, man, it was lovely. Just imagine to yourself but what's the good? She is indescribable. Marquand paused and looked away with that strange exalted air that had puzzled me so often. Is? I queried softly. I was afraid of, as he said, drying him up. Yes, is. You see her picture, then? I see her. To say that I was flabbergasted is to use a miserably inadequate expression. What was this all about? Was I talking to a madman? But if it was a delusion, as of course it must be, it was the sanest and most deliberately nurtured delusion that ever a man originated. That was all Marquand told me that day.
Middle?
I think his idea was to let me so far into his amazing secret and to let what he had told me sink in,
Go in our
so
basement,
as to judge
come
by my
outside.
manner how I took it and whether I were worthy of further confidence. But it was evidently a great relief to him to be able to talk at all about it. He often set little traps for me to see if I would laugh or doubt or sneer. But as time went on, and I always listened with a keen interest, which required no simulation, he arrived at telling me the progress of his adventure step by step. And as I've said, what he left out then, I could supply from his journal of the affair afterwards. It would take far too long. It would indeed fill a volume of no mean
Red tower,
size,
stop,
were
sniper.
I to set down here the gradual anastomosis, or a term from the physiologists, of Marquand and Alila, how they arrived at the meanings of words, and how, out of the chaos of incomprehensible sounds, they arrived at conversation. It is not enough, but it must be taken as enough, to record that Marquand little by little arrived at knowing all about Alila and about life on the planet Venus, where the physical sciences had reached a development which would stagger the imagination of a Jules Verne reduced to the power of N. What is really most important was the stunning fact that Marquand was in love with Alila, as only a bachelor of his age can be, when he makes his first acquaintance with the grand passion. It will be observed that I have not hitherto touched upon a very important point.
Oh, what's up?
You will not unnaturally have been asking yourself how on Earth, or rather Venus, had Alila learned the Morse code.
Get him. He has
As soon as
OS
I felt
right there.
that I could safely ask questions without drying him up, I put this to Marquand. Oh, he replied, of course I ought to have told you that. She learned from our fleet signalers during the war. What? It takes some believing, doesn't it? The question of interplanetary signaling has always been a burning
That's pretty
one up
common.
there. They signal to many other planets already, but they had never picked up Earth, which, by the way, they call Waluma. Aliyah, you will not be surprised to hear, is a great astronomical nut up there, and she has been searching Waluma for the sign for years. In August 1914 and onwards, she
On our flag,
observed that
two of
our
them?
seas were constantly
we're all dead.
starred
Okay.
with intermittent flashes. Of course, their telescopes are to ours what Big Bertha was to a pop gun. And after puzzling over them for months, she found that there was a regular sequence of them, and that certain groups of dots and dashes continually recurred, especially ringing up with a series of E's, and that a single E at a short distance always stopped it. She got on to the full stop ack, bit E at the end of a message almost directly. And from this, she gradually worked out all our letters. Not in their order, of course. One of her first questions when we could talk was to inquire what were top and E, T and E, our commonest letters. She had got a lot of common words pat. And the, it,
Middle.
and so on. What did she make of it? Why, the inference was obvious to her. We were signaling to Venus. Good heavens. What confused her most were the constant and reiterated E's on land. Those were the flashes of the great guns. It made one's brain reel. I seldom had to ask a question. And here
OS
it
is
becomes
up. He
very
has it in the middle.
difficult for me to write all about it. I've been so shocked by the death of Marquand and all that it meant and conveyed to me.
Burned it.
A terrible proof, as it would seem, that this amazing adventure was no delusion at all, but drew to its
Halo, bro.
inevitable and tragic end irresistibly, that I cannot think with equanimity of anyone even smiling at details which would readily lend
Go hard in the
themselves
paint, you know what I
to
mean?
humorous treatment, but which were in themselves the very essence of the tragedy. In the foremost place there stood the fact that Alila had conformably with the customs of her planet 7 husbands.
Our own world, yeah.
A multiple fact, that did not in any way appear to militate against her full reciprocation of Mark I's passion. Husbands in Venus appear to be of a singularly easygoing disposition throughout mundane intelligence, but an exception would appear to occur at intervals, and one of these loomed large in Alila's cosmogony, in the shape of an infuriated and jealous male. Highly intellectual as Alila was, and occupying an exalted position
You should ask
in the
Michelangelo
scientific
about
world
that.
of the planet, this husband,
Oh.
Iluha by name, was to Alila,
All puns
an
intended,
ignorant
thank
woman,
you.
only one of course, would be to a Regis professor at one of our own universities. A woman who sets her own personal
Funny how they set that up that way.
gratification and feelings far above the career and the life interests of her husband. And so, in her affair with Mark Wand, Alila had to be very careful. In certain mundane circles, her attitude would probably be described as wily. It was all very well for Alila to shut herself up in her observatory and communicate with her terrestrial lover. Iluha, who was of course not ignorant of the vast potentiality of astrophysics on Venus, was, it appeared, far from easy in his mind as to the scope and extent of Alila's researches. And, well, as I have said, Alila had to be very careful. Very frequently, the nightly communion would be intercepted by unreasonably luxurious approaches, not to mention physical interruptions, which scared Alila intempestively from the photo.
Good kill, bro.
And it seemed from a note
Another
of
one,
Mark
another
Wand that Alila had, in a moment of relaxed vigilance, allowed Iluha to catch sight of sundry telephotographs of Mark Wand. And, to put it perhaps somewhat crudely, Iluha was on the prowl. All might, however, have been well had it not been for the
got
high
it.
quality of Alila's scientific knowledge, attainments, and ambitions. From transmitting very remarkable...
Oh, and he's at the bottom? He's like,
highly
man, you
compromising
just did it
pictures
all.
of herself, she soared to the ambition of, and devoted much research to, the accomplishment of transmitting herself. That is to say, a replica, an astral body of herself, perfect in every essential detail, and of a bodily consistency adequate to all practical purposes. Of the development and ultimate success of this crowning triumph of Alila's scientific career, I can only gather
need
the
to put on a
broad
hoodie.
outlines, for Mark Wand himself seems to have
I'm
grown
getting-
shy
I'm
of
getting
his
sweaty
record
over
in
here.
this matter, and the scientific accuracy of
The
his
elbow up.
register is marred from this point by a doubtless proper and laudable discretion, which leaves certain details, but not many, to the imagination,
Oh, excuse me.
and tends therefore to the detriment of scientific knowledge. It must remain enough to say that the semi but not too ethereal Avila came to Earth and visited Mark Wand in his observatory whenever she could get away, whilst her physical body remained on guard, as it were, in her observatory in Venus. And it must be recorded to her credit that she never attempted to conceal from Mark Wand the paramount, the terrible danger of these astral excursions.
Eat lead, Venus.
Though her physical body remained behind, she brought her intellect to Earth with her. And this it was that in fullness of time brought her and Mark Wand to grief. For the physical body, temporarily bereft of its directing
One shot middle?
mind,
One shot
was
middle?
not up to controlling the apparatus, and the romance
got
of
it.
her interviews with Mark Wand must have been seriously hampered by the necessity of keeping an eye on the screen and an ear at the phototelephone.
Appreciate it. I love losing.
Consequently, these amazing interviews had to be arranged for occasions when Iluha could be counted upon to be absent.
Oh, you want me to leave? I'm doing good, you know what I
Anything
mean?
not likely to come
I think they're not understanding here.
Observatory.
They're not. It's not registering.
From what one could gather, the position of husbands in Venus is,
I'm not gonna do gathering. They
beside, of
piss me
course, their
off.
plurality, much the same as that of wives in the so-called
I have more
civilized
control here.
portions of the Earth,
You know.
and perhaps vice versa. Mark Wand was, as I have indicated, reticent as to the details of his interviews with Alila in conversation with me, and a fortiori recorded in his scientific
it's
journal
definitely ideal,
only
but
political, economical, and
don't get me
sometimes
wrong.
ethnological details of life on the planet. In
Abra.
looking over the record, it may be said that the personal equation must have bulked largely in their communion for lengthy meetings with Alila, frequently furnished but a few lines in either his private or scientific journals. He tried to explain to me, however, the nature of the risks they ran, but the explanation was largely beyond my powers of comprehension. Hertzian waves, potential, amperage, and other technical terms bristled in his exposition, and I gave up trying to become an expert in the matter. I only knew that the physical Alila left behind had mechanical control of the projection apparatus, and if disturbed or damaged, might work irretrievable disaster.
You can shut up.
It was
real
clear
quick,
that the
ladies and
interference of
gentlemen.
any unauthorized or inexperienced
I assure you. Shut the fuck up, and I mean sooner than later.
Divert the full force of Alila's generating plant along the communicating beam. Upon what would happen in that event, Marquand did not care to speculate. The
Yeah, it's just like that.
Alila,
You probably shouldn't
he
have
said,
done that.
would almost
You know what I mean?
certainly be destroyed. And what would happen here, it is difficult to conjecture.
Not
I
your
should
dog.
imagine some form of instantaneous annihilation. Volatilization, I don't know. But we take all necessary and possible precautions. I hazarded a question.
Go ahead and get that cap.
Is the replica Alila of sufficient substance to suffer physical hurt? He thought for a moment, and I am not sure that he did not blush a little. Then he replied, "Oh, yes, there is little doubt about that." Take another postulate, I said. Supposing some unauthorized person, we seldom or never mention Eluha by name, but from motives of delicacy, no doubt, were to get at the apparatus
There we
in
go.
the replica absence, and supposing that person found himself, or herself, I hastily added, projected along the ray in
No
some
counter
way,
cap here.
what then? Marquand, I am sorry to say, shrugged his shoulders and laughed. Yes, he positively
Okay.
laughed.
Gotcha.
And instead of answering, he turned away, chanting under his breath a line of an old plantation song, which ran, "The congregation all stand up and sing hallelujah."
Did I not say no counter cap?
My stay with Marquand was drawing to its close, but I lingered on, obsessed with a vague feeling of apprehension. Though in no way regarding myself in any degree in the light of a chaperone, I did not think it quite safe or quite proper to leave him alone with Alila. I hinted at a visit elsewhere, accompanied by him. I would have liked to see him safely back to town, but he would not hear of it. Marquand was lovelorn, and he was very happy. I grew more and more apprehensive, and, I will admit it, more and more curious. I endeavored to convey to him that I would like to be present at one of their interviews, and then it was Marquand's turn to be shocked. I felt at once that I had been guilty of the most indelicate indiscretion. So there was nothing for it but to wait, on the chance of being of some use should an emergency arise. We come, therefore, to the night, or rather the early morning of the 14th. For some days Marquand had been preoccupied, nervy, and I gathered that things were not going as pleasantly as they might. In a word, Eluha was giving trouble, and it became an increasing strain to keep in touch, so to speak, with the observatory in Venus, whilst occupied in the researches and instructive discourse which should, from their point of view, have exclusively occupied their periods of companionship. "It's rather difficult sometimes," he admitted, "to keep the necessary amount of attention fixed upon what is going on up there."
Okay, we'll start another video. Keep it short, I think is what he's wanting. He mentioned that earlier. I'm listening. I feel like I was gonna do something. Yeah, I'm not gonna do magic. Again, we're limited here. That control, magic would be worse. I would be literally just sitting there, like, staring at the screen. So, I'm not gonna do that. I cannot wait, dude. All they're doing is pissing me off, so. Truly, I mean what I say. I am more than angry with you as you sit there and do whatever the fuck you think you're gonna do. Now you know.